Good morning, people. This is Thunder in the Desert, coming to you from the wonderful, wonderful location of Sandy Valley, Nevada. And I really mean that because it is, even though it's harsh, it's beautiful. 50 miles southwest of Vegas, so I can jump into Vegas if I want. Not that I want. Today I want to talk about my life as a jazz drummer. I thought I would get into that today because I had a long and, let's say, exciting career as a drummer. And I say jazz drummer because, let me qualify that. I didn't start off as a jazz drummer, but to me, the ultimate accomplishment in the field of music is, and if you're a drummer, is being a jazz drummer. I know a lot of people don't like jazz because they don't understand it. It's kind of like classical music. And sometimes I don't even like to use the word jazz because people form a certain thing in their mind about what it is, and they don't really know shit about it. But anyway, let's start, since we're talking about, and the light could change in here because it is kind of a beautiful overcast day out here in the desert, so the clouds are going to be going in and out. And thunder could get darker and lighter. So bear with me here. But anyway, let's start when I first started playing drums. I think I was 2 years old. I was 2 years old and beating on pots and pans, so my mother told me. And then in the second grade, I started getting some formal training in school. Learning how to read music and getting into the school band and taking lessons from the school musical director. And I lived in Arizona. And I was exposed at an early age to jazz. My parents played a lot of Benny Goodman and the king of swing, Glenn Miller in the orchestra and big band stuff. And it had a deep influence on me because my father was a musician, but he was also managed a theater where he booked bands, all kinds of bands. And my mother was a dancer. In fact, that's where he met my mother. And so I was exposed to music in that genre of jazz. And so, as I listened and I grew up, of course, I was exposed to everything. My parents listened to all kinds of music, country and western, but mostly swing music. And there's that old saying, if it doesn't swing, it doesn't mean a thing, and that's true. If it doesn't have the groove, no matter what kind of music you're playing, it doesn't mean shit. Because it has to have that groove, that good feeling. And as a drummer, that's very, very important. So anyway, as my life went on, one of my idols was a drummer named Gene Krupa, who played with the Benny Goodman orchestra. And he played drums. He played drums like you wouldn't believe. He was really into African rhythms. And he incorporated that into his style. Yeah, there were other great drummers like Buddy Rich, and But for some reason, I gravitated to Gene Krupa and I tried to emulate his style. That was one of the first styles I emulated. And as I grew older, as I got into high school and stuff, I started forming bands or getting into bands that have been formed and playing different kinds of music, Dixieland, jazz, that type of thing. And yeah, there was a lot of rock and roll then, and I was exposed to that. So eventually, I know I'm going to leave something out here, but when you played drums as long as I have and started as young as I did, you're going to leave a whole bunch of shit out that's probably important. But I'm just going to scratch the surface here, jump around. So when I got into high school, I got into, started getting more exposed to music from my peers, other kids, people that I, was in band with, and I was always in band at school. And so my first band was a type of, the first thing I got into, I guess, would be blues, okay, a blues band. Although I did play in a bar when I was 16 years old. My first time I played in a bar was when I was 16. Sat in there. But anyway, I digress. The first type of band I got into that was kind of like a band of my peers or what everybody was listening to was, I guess, it was a Yardbirds. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Yardbirds, but that's where Jeff Beck originated. And so we formed a group called Maya. Actually, first it was called Saturday's Children. And then it was called Maya. Maya meaning illusion. And we were a very well-known band around Phoenix, Arizona. And we had some excellent musicians in the band. As a matter of fact, we got invited to play at my first exposure to the big time was we got invited to play for James Brown's penthouse party. James Brown being the godfather of soul. And that was quite an experience for a bunch of kids to be exposed to James Brown. And his rhythm section was at his penthouse party. First we played, and then they sat up and played. Talk about being mesmerized, because that was about as soulful and as funky as you can get. So I was exposed to the black side of music at an early age, the soul, and it really left a deep, deep impression on me. And from that time on, I gravitated towards black music or soulful music. And we got cruised that night by some A&R people, the band did, and got offered contracts and that type of thing. That's a whole nother story. Then I moved to the coast and moved to the West Coast. I started playing with musicians there, and I still gravitated towards soulful music. And I got into a band, and that band was called Maya too, because I brought my own name with me and suggested it to the guys there, and they were all down with that. And so we practiced and practiced and practiced. And let me say one thing right now. As a drummer, I practiced hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. But I'll get into that later. Now that band that I got into on the coast was a soul group, and it was in the '60s, and so we played a lot of love-ins, okay, and we played. I can't even describe what I went through at some of those gatherings, but needless to say, that was an era in which I was exposed to all kinds of things: drugs, women, everything. Okay, let's put it this way: Thunder wasn't naive anymore. And we played. We were very well known, and we played on the Strip at the. I even forget the name of the place, but it was very popular. It'll come to me maybe as I'm talking about it, but it was right next to that building on 77 Sunset Strip, which was a movie, or was a show on TV. Anyway, heyday 60s, Hollywood Strip. Got offered all kinds of contracts there. Most of them fell through. That was the nature of the business. We also got offered to play at the Fillmore, but we didn't make it up there. But we played a lot of music all around LA, San Francisco, San Diego. And that was a cooking band, baby. It was on top of it. We played everywhere. Hell, we even played for a Hell's Angel party one time because we knew those guys in the '60s. And we played at this place called the Big House. The Big House, and they actually drove their motorcycles right in the living room. And then we played at the Sanssouci Temple, which was where in LA, which was a Frank Lloyd Wright place. See, it's getting darker. It's okay. And it was in the movie The Trip with Peter Fonda. And now that I recall, it was that place on the Strip was called the Sea Witch, is where we played, the Sea Witch on the Strip. So anyway, I continued on with that band, learning as much as I could, playing the blues, playing outright soul, Ray Charles stuff. Most of the stuff we played was soulful, although we did get into a lot of blues too, like the Paul Butterfield Blues Band type stuff, and but most of the stuff, I mean, we'd even play soulful stuff like Bobby Blue Bland and all that type of thing. I'm covering a lot of ground here, people, and leaving a lot of things out. I could write a book about it. The band that I played in were some bad MFers, and they got down. Okay, and we didn't listen to any kind of white music. We only listened to black music. We called everything else candy ass. Then I got to a certain point where I started listening to jazz, okay, again, because I was exposed to it in an early age, but I started gravitating towards Miles Davis. Well, he blew my mind because he was just coming out with an album called Bitches Brew, and he was getting out of the bebop and the cool thing and getting into downright, outright, soulful, funky shit. He was a bad mofo. And it blew my mind. And so I started, I was close to LA, and Miles appeared in LA with the album, the band that he did Bitches Brew with, which is a landmark album. And I used to go up to LA all the time and hang out up there at the place called Shelley's Manhole, which is a little intimate club where you could see very, very advanced musicians like Miles Davis. And I used to go up there, I'd get high. Of course, I did. I would hang out with the cats up there. And I met everybody that was in Miles' band, hung out with them, talked shit, and got exposed to a whole different genre, or let's say not a different genre, but an advanced genre. And at this particular time, I didn't really, I wasn't as proficient as I should have been in jazz. So I made a big decision in my life, and I decided that I was going to leave the blues soul band that I was in and venture off into a what I call woodshedding, where you just practice and practice and practice. And I practiced till every day, probably for, let's say maybe 4 to 6 hours a day, and till my hands were bloody from blisters. And if you ever saw the movie Whiplash, about a drummer, that's pretty much what I was going through learning jazz. And as I was doing this, I made trips to Vegas and started rubbing shoulders with the guys that were in the pit bands. In the old Vegas, they had pit bands for all the shows. It wasn't recorded like it is now. And you had the finest musicians in the world playing in these pit bands of like maybe 30 people in a band. And I had some friends that had gone to Vegas from San Diego, and so I came over here. Actually, I'm back, coming full circle now, and hung out with them and started learning all I could about jazz. And they took me under their wing, and I really didn't know shit. But there were a few musicians, a bass player and a sax player, who I would end up being in a band with later. They took me under their wing and they taught me the rudiments of jazz, and we had a lot of jam sessions, and I went to a lot of jam sessions. And jam sessions in Vegas started at, let's say, 2 in the morning, because all the guys would get off from the pit band, and then we'd go to this place called the Tender Trap. Might still even be here. And we would party till all hours of the morning, playing jazz and hanging out, and we wouldn't get home till dawn, okay, or past dawn. And so, yeah, music, and it was nothing but partying and women and having fun. And yes, all the stories you heard about groupies are true. But it was a wild scene, and I wouldn't trade it for the world, having gone through that. And I learned so much. And I continued on and on and on, and came back to San Diego, and then I became quite proficient as a jazz drummer. And I teamed up with a sax player that I knew in Vegas, and we formed a band, and we played at a place in La Jolla, which is a very highbrow place. And I'm leaving a lot of bands and a lot of stuff I've done out. I mean, this video would be like 6 hours long, so I'm just kind of skimming the surface here, because I want you to know the other side of Thunder and what I did in my life, because I don't really talk about it that much, and not too many people know about it. But that's where I gained a lot of my creativity, and that's where I really, to be truthful with you, got into controlling energy and realizing that energy is something that is the whole ball of wax. I also got into the martial arts because you can't be a drummer and be a couch potato, okay? So I kept in shape. I'm still in shape for my age. But anyway, I digress. I got into this jazz group, and we backed, our rhythm section backed all kinds of notable jazz greats, and I'm going to mention a few of them. You probably don't know who they are, but you can Google them and find out. But I worked with Don Menza, who was a sax player that used to play in the Tonight Show band with Johnny Carson. I worked with Art Pepper, who was a monstrous recording artist and bebop and cool jazz musician. I worked with Blue Mitchell, a trumpet player, black trumpet player. Both of those gentlemen are no longer with us. I worked with a trumpet player named Luis Gasca, who worked with Santana and Janis Joplin and the Grateful Dead and Malo and Joe Henderson. So I was exposed to some real heavyweights and had to learn my craft enough so that I could work with them. And so I went on later on even to be Luis Gasca's personal drummer, and formed groups with him. And again, he was he played with Tito Puente, Malo, Santana. He actually taught Santana how to play jazz. So anyway, like I said, I'm just scratching the surface here now that, you know, I've played concerts before 4,000 people. And, you know, all of this stuff contributed. You know, sometimes I refer to myself as a shaman or a holy man, or I was actually, as a musician, that's where I first got into shamanism. That's where because Miles Davis, one of my idols at the time, and John Coltrane, all those guys were shaman in their own rights. And let me tell you why. Because when you're on stage and you're playing before 3,000-4,000 people, or even 50 people, when you get really, really good in your craft, let's say as a drummer, you listen to all different kinds of styles, and you practice for hours and hours and hours, and you learn the rudiments, and you learn how to read music, sight read music, and you learn all the technical stuff. But when you get on stage, if you're a good musician, you relinquish or release trying to do anything in a technical fashion. And if you're a drummer, you let the drums play you. You open up a channel to, and really good musicians do this. That's why people get so excited and they feel the energy at concerts. It's because they're getting sucked right into the cosmos, or the creative energy of the universe, if the musicians are really, really good. A lot of musicians just go through the paces. They don't really open up that channel like Coltrane and Miles Davis and the heavyweights did, and let the energy flow right down through them and play them, okay? Because they've already learned the technical aspects, so they release that, and it's all in their brain. But when they open up that channel, they let it flow. They don't think about, I'm going to play a rudiment, I'm going to play a paradiddle, or I'm going to play a 5-stroke roll, or I'm going to play this certain beat on my cymbal. Actually, you raise right up. I have many times. You rise up out of your body and you're looking there down at your body playing the drums, okay? You actually leave your physical being and watch yourself playing, because you've already learned the rudiments and you've already learned the ropes, and it becomes an energy thing. And if you've ever watched Miles Davis on stage, particularly in his last years, with his advanced band that he had, as he would be playing before hundreds of thousands of people at Montreux or the Newport Jazz Festival or whatever, he would call his musicians over to him and have them stand about, at least one or two of them, those that could, had a guitar or something. He'd have them come over and he would touch them on the shoulder and he would look right in their eyes and he would rub shoulders with them, and then he'd push them away and they would go on over to somebody else. And, like, unbeknownst to people in the audience, that's a transference of energy and spreading of energy around. And what happens is that if you're really good, when you're out of your body and when you're in that situation where you're watching yourself play, all the musicians in the band, like Miles' band or any really good band, will merge into one mind. They'll merge into one mind, and it will become synchronicity. Because some of the hits that you have to do together, you couldn't do that unless you go to that place. Okay, so that's where Thunder learned how to channel energy, and that's where I learned how to circulate energy, because that happens with the audience. As you're playing, you're circulating energy out the top of your head or down through the top of your head and out your base chakra, which is a very sexual thing. That's why people feel turned on when they hear musicians. And so you have complete control over that, and you're circulating it with those in the audience, okay? And you might even pick out a particular person in the audience that will inspire you. Now, I'll admit it, I would pick out women in the audience that I knew were into the music, and I would feed off their energy and communicate with them from the stage. Sometimes they knew it, sometimes they didn't. Inspirational stuff, that's what inspires musicians, is not only the music, but the interaction that you get on a natural, primal level, okay? And so that's why the big attraction to musicians, because they feel the connection and they want to get closer, okay? It's not about just being with a musician. They actually, speaking from the point of view of, let's say, groupies or whatever, they actually feel a strong magnetic or energetic attraction. None of this stuff is bad. It's all good. It's all very hip, okay? And so, I just thought I wanted to scratch the surface a little bit and let you know about my life as a musician. I feel like I've lived 10 lives. Someday I'll talk about my life as a pilot, and someday I'll talk about my life as a martial artist. But it all melds into one because you use all those things. And as I got older, I gravitated towards my spiritual practices. I should say my other spiritual practices, because music is very spiritual. You can't get more spiritual than John Coltrane. You can't get more spiritual than Miles Davis. but I incorporated it into my Taoist beliefs and my Native American beliefs. And it's been a journey of being a shaman's apprentice. Shall I put it that way? A shaman's apprentice, or an apprenticeship for shamanism. And I look at everything in that light. And I still use, even when I'm not on stage, or not playing music, I use that feeling and that energy just like I was on stage, and I use that creative part of my brain, the yin part. There's yin and yang. The creative part tends to be more yin, and the yang part is more left brain. So you got left brain and right brain. And then it integrates, because you have to have intellect to read music and that type of thing. So yeah. Just a little bit about Thunder's background as a musician. And no, I'm not playing professionally right now. Kind of retired, but never know. Circumstances didn't permit me for a while because of losing transportation and connections and all that. But my drums are in the other room. They're not that far away. And I play them daily, and I play them for my own enjoyment, because drums are the oldest instrument on earth, drums and flute. And I also play flute now. I play Native American flute. And those are the two oldest instruments on earth, so I use that for a connection, or to connect with spirit. And I play for myself now. There's no pressure. All the time that I was going through my career as a musician, there was a lot of fucking pressure. Because you constantly were in a competitive situation with other musicians, and you were constantly scuffling to make a living. Anybody knows that a jazz musician has a real hard time making a living. Even the ones, unless you get into the area of, like, you're just a top recording artist, okay? But even they, feast and famine, baby. Feast or famine. It's either you're feasting or you're starving. Starving musician syndrome. But when I played music, I wasn't in it for the money. I was in it for the love of the music. And when I do the martial arts, I'm not in it for the money or to teach others, although I do teach others. I'm in it because I love it. And anything that I do is because I love it. Money is secondary. If it comes, it's fine. If it doesn't, that's fine too. If you go through life pursuing things for money, in my opinion, you're missing out on your love, the love of the pursuit for what you, the creativity, all that type of thing. You don't do it for money. Money might come. It might come, but you don't do it for that. Just like my love for people allows me to do videos and teach meditation, and I don't charge for it. It's nice though when I can have a personal one-on-one with somebody. I miss that sometimes, because I used to teach. I'm a teacher, okay, and so right now I'm in a secluded state, but if anybody wants to contact me about hooking up, I'm open to it, but I'm picky. um, and I will show people certain things. I teach the martial arts, and I actually could teach drums if I wanted to, percussion. But right now, I'm more into teaching people about energy and how you can use it to your advantage. And that's kind of what brings Thunder right up to what, the videos that he's been doing, and tapping into the ancestral native thing, and the Taoist thing, and progressing on to a holy man. The making of a holy man. And I don't call myself that easily. It was a long time coming, baby. But let me tell you that saying that Lame Deer says about, in order to be a saint or a holy man, you have to be a sinner. And I guess some people would call the hard, fast, partying life of a musician, especially a jazz musician, they might call that sinning. Although I don't. I call it learning about life, and not being, and getting rid of naivete and tapping into the cool, baby. So anyway, I think I'll just leave it there today. I don't want to belabor this point. I just wanted to scratch the surface, and there's a million stories I could tell you. There's a million escapades with parties with people like Buddy Miles, the drummer for Hendrix, and all-night parties and pool parties, and oh my God, let's put it this way, Thunder's been around the block a few times. So anyway, don't let it scare you, though. If you're somebody that's watching this video and you want to hook up, don't let that scare you. I'm relatively harmless at this point. Yeah. Okay, I'll leave it there. Some food for thought, people, about the life of Thunder and his escapades as a jazz drummer and a drummer. And let me say, I just as a final parting thought here, there was a period of time when I was doing a lot of studio work, and my whole thing was being a studio drummer. I don't want to leave this out because it's important. Just came to me. And I wanted to have the chops where I could go into the fucking studio and cut anything. In other words, if they needed a country western drummer, I played country and western. If they needed a blues drummer, I played blues. If they needed a bossa nova drummer, Latin drummer, I love Latin music, salsa. And so I could go in and virtually play anything, and I have. And so I don't want you to think that even commercials for TV, did a bunch of those too. So I don't want you to think that that Thunder is just a purist. I've played everything, baby, everything. Hell, I was even recruited to play in the resurrection of Bill Haley and the Comets band. You know how they resurrect bands and there's some original members, and so I've done the whole gamut. And like I said, I'm leaving out a lot. I could never cover what I've done in music. Anyway, that thought came to me right at the last there, and I wanted to get that in. So anyway, this is Thunder, walking the red road. See you later. Adios.